Good morning. I am Kennedy Hogue from the class of 2024. My pronouns are she, her. I am this year's MOK Convocation co-chair. We would first like to say thank you to all who helped us execute this program for you all. Our Director of Equity and Inclusion, Ms. Kayla Storrs, our Assistant Principal, Mr. Corey Pettigrew, our guest speaker, Mr. Vop Osili, and all of our members of our committee who worked tirelessly to plan a quality convocation for our Brebeuf community. At this time, would our community members please stand to be recognized? While most of our Brebeuf events begin with a prayer and the singing of the national anthem, we would like to take this opportunity to celebrate the beauty of Blackness and the resiliency of our Black community by kicking us off with Lift Every Voice and Sing, more commonly known as the Black National Anthem. Lift Every Voice and Sing was a hymn written as a poem by NAACP leader James Weldon Johnson in 1900. His brother, John Rosamond Johnson, composed the music for the lyrics. A choir of 500 school children at the segregated Stanton School, where James Weldon Johnson was principal, first performed the song in public in Jacksonville, Florida, to celebrate President Abraham Lincoln's birthday. At the turn of the 20th century, Johnson's lyrics eloquently captured the solemn yet hopeful appeal for the liberty of Black Americans. Set against the religious invocation of God and the promise of freedom, the song was later adopted by NAACP and prominently used as a rallying cry during the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s. The lyrics can be found on the screen. Please join us in welcoming our students from our Brebeuf Choir.
We sing the right. Historically, being black is rooted in the beginning of mankind, deriving from Africa, which is a continent of many different cultures, tribes, and countries in itself of black people, with different traditions, dialects, ways of living, physical features, gifts, and more. From there, black people were stolen from across the world, and we have evolved with more cultures, traditions, ways of life, and contributions. We have black people who are French, American, Caribbean, Latino, etc. There is history that teaches migration and how black people arrived in specific parts of the world, which I do not have enough time today to dig into, but I urge each of you to take time to do more research. The most amazing thing is that black people are historically known to be the eldest living ethnicity, where all human races have originated from. Up until current times, we have largely contributed to the evolution of the world across all industries and ways of life. Whether it be inventions, discoveries, research, developments, education, or revolutionary things that have all progressed societies, including our own. What I'm going to touch on today is not merely 1% of the richness or magnitudes of what black people have done for this world, for all of us in this room, and the betterment of mankind. I am now going to take you on a journey to give you a small insight into what the essence and experience of what being black is as it relates to me and all people in the world. I want to spend time today telling the truth and giving all accolades that we truly deserve because all that we have done and continue to do up until this very second and beyond. Do you know what comes with being black? No, I am not asking you to imagine a reality you don't have, but to put yourself into the perspective of the media, history, and the world of portrayal of black people. As it relates to black people in America, we have endured, for hundreds of years, mistreatment, inequality, violence, and blatant racism. For reasons that are obvious and others that I, as a black male, won't ever be able to answer nor understand, we have been taught that we receive this treatment simply because of the pigment of our skin. American history has had a field day with painting a picture that is not filled with a lot of truth regarding black people in America. We know this framework to have been established to put America in the hands of those that benefit from this false narrative. Black people were somehow made out to be less than the average American, when in actuality, we are more than. We came from a continent where we were kings and queens, the originators of so many things such as agriculture, economy, businesses, creativity, and so much more. For a second, imagine being taken from a sense of utopia, your land, your family, the only life you've ever known. We were deprived of proper education, everyday access to things that were essential to a decent life, and the humane things that we are all deserving of, like safety, education, rights, and resources. American society built their framework to strip black people of their greatness, their power, their memory of the kings and queens they came from, and their will. Despite all that we have endured, the most has been the continuance, still having to fight for our rights, having to march for our lives decades later, and still not having justice for those aimlessly abused, killed, and mistreated at the hands of racism, and those who are not found guilty or even held accountable for their grotesque ways of thinking and actions. The magnitude of being black is powerful. We've all heard the terms, black girl magic, black boy joy. There is something magical about being black. It is our ability to not stoop down to the reality that was made for us, but to occupy the greatness that is intertwined into our fabric of who we are. Somehow, black people remain resilient and continue to grow and evolve throughout families, communities, education, occupations, and every factor of life. As you might say, what are the pros of being a black person in America? Especially when all that is promoted is the worst of it. It has been an experience for many of us around the world, but specifically in America. Where's the light? What is the benefit of being a black American in this day and age? I can imagine that is a hard question for anyone to answer, but miraculously, the beauty of being black is the beauty of happiness and joy. To be standing here in my truth, my reality, being able to enrich you with the experience and history is a pro. America has far more work to do as it relates to the experience of black people that black people have had in this country that we helped create. It is no new discovery that being a black man in America comes with constant difficulties as we are met with racism and prejudice. But as I witness my community create our own music, dances, theology, food, and support systems, there is no other skin that I'd rather be in than my own. Today, we celebrate so many things that you may or may not have known. Being black is not limited to our undeniable intelligence, compassion, empathy, and love. That is not subject to just one race, culture, or ethnicity. It is something that we all have the right to experience. None of us have the right to deprive anyone of what they deserve on this earth that was created for us all equally. The word culture has two meanings. Culture means the art and other manifestations of human intellectual achievements regarded collectively for the customs, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation of people or other social groups. When you hear the word culture attached to black people, you should think of all those things. Whether you hear someone or something reference black people, all of this is what you should know, understand, research, and celebrate, because it's who we are, what we have done, and what we continue to do that is not just for the benefit of us, but for the progression of our country as a whole. Our culture is composed of many different types of black people, all who captivate differing thoughts, values, beliefs, skills, and experiences. The beauty of blackness is far more than a color. It is not defined by the tangible things such as your home, car, clothing, or any other materialistic items that you may adore. I challenge each of you to educate yourself on the core essence of what it means to live out these sacred aspects that we, black people, originated from, and how we continue to apply certain traditions to our everyday lives. My story does not discredit anyone else's, but the beautiful thing about being a human being on this earth is that we all have the right to a full human experience, but we also have the duty of making sure that those around us do not have a bad one. As I think of the question, what do I want my peers to know about my blackness? Many ideas come to mind, such as, how do others perceive me? And what is my purpose in this world? I believe that everyone has a purpose in life, and it is your responsibility to find it and live it out. Recently, I've asked myself, who am I? I ponder on this question because it is one that I do not have a straightforward answer to. It is one that takes time for me to fully grasp and understand. As I think of ways to answer this question, I usually resort to things that I enjoy doing, hobbies, and people that are in my life. I have realized that I enjoy spending time with my family, traveling, and that I have established friendships that will potentially be everlasting. Being raised by my black family and village of loved ones has provided me with a wonderful foundation of understanding who I am and my purpose today. One reason I am so proud to be black is because I was raised and have had such beautiful examples that have encapsulated the greatness behind it. The great Dr. Martin Luther King references, I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear. I am me because I was created to be a human being on this earth, not confined to the ill thinking or ill will of any man, but raised, loved, and supported by my beautiful black family, friends, and loved ones to know that love always wins. It has provided me with the greatest example and blueprint for who I am creating myself to be. I am beginning to now understand that my purpose on this earth is to contribute greatly my compassion, as well as my understanding and ability to see people for who they are and not what they are. These are just some of my attributes instilled in me through my faith, family, culture, and loved ones. I urge each of you to love whomever with no limitations. Embrace cultures outside of your own, and always strive to learn the beauty in us all. In reference to the history that black people have had to endure, we know that all things aren't as they seem. As the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Those greatness is being just who we are, how we love, how we thrive, and how we greatly contribute to our world. It is imperative that we acknowledge the values and beliefs that Martin Luther King Jr. lived by, and the humanity of every human being, far beyond just the observed holiday, but every day. May we carry on his legacy, one that has captivated our history daily, as we continually strive to be individuals who lead with love, compassion, understanding, working towards the dream that MLK shared with us 60 years ago, equity for all people. Thank you.
Good morning, and my goodness, thank you for blessing us this morning, Jaden. So, yes, give the man his flowers. So here for it. Very long. As you know, if that's the case, Kennedy, you want to tap on President Osili outside and let him know that we are ready for him. Thank you all again for your patience with us this morning as we are making it happen. And at this time, Kennedy is going to introduce President Osili.
Good morning once again. Someone who has chosen to be a buffalo for the city of Indianapolis and takes on the challenges of our community is President Vop Osili. Mr. Osili is the president of the City-County Council, and he represents District 11, which covers a large portion of the downtown area, including IUPUI's campus. He was elected in 2018 by a unanimous vote. President Osili graduated from Carnegie Mellon University with a bachelor's in architecture. He earned a master's degree in urban design from Columbia University. President Osili is committed to the important issues of affordable housing, homelessness, and reentry from prison. I could go on about President Osili's accomplishments, but what I'm sure he is most proud of is being a father to 2 amazing kids and a husband to his wife. Please join me by giving a brave welcome to City County Council President Mr. Vop Osili.
Good morning. Can you all hear me? Yes. All right. Thank you for that very kind welcome. And it's good to be back at Brebeuf. I am a Brebeuf dad of 1, and it's possible I may be a Brebeuf dad of 2 come September. So maybe you all will see a little bit more of me. Let me start off by saying that we're here today in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King, a champion of civil rights, but I think more importantly, a champion of human rights. And when we talk about human rights, it's not a new thing at all. Back in, 539 BC, the Persian Emperor Cyrus the Great, who conquered Babylon, for all of you all, I'm sure you all, this is all still fresh in your minds, he freed slaves to return home and declared that people should have a choice in their religion. And this event is considered by many to be the world's first charter of human rights in history. But when we think about it, that was 2,561 years ago. If it's a trend, it's one of the longest in history. And yet women in this country, in the United States of America, have had the right to vote for only 102 years. And let's be precise, it's white women in America who have been allowed to vote for 102 years. And individual states could and did pass laws that effectively that barred black people, that's men and women, and other people of color, from voting until the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That's just 58 years ago. Now, the discussion of human rights, the main one that we're talking about, of Cyrus the Great, remember, is 2,500 years ago. And in this country, folks who looked like myself could have been barred from the most fundamental right that we have as Americans, and that is to vote. So this July, this country is going to be 246 years old. And people who look like me, as I said, have been able to vote for only legally, constitutionally, for 58 years of those. And it's only been 54 years since someone who looked like myself could legally live in any neighborhood in our country. And many of you know, it's only been 7 years since same-sex couples have been allowed to marry. So this topic of human rights is somehow one of the oldest and yet most current conversations that we as human beings can have. A trend both old and new, and an idea well established and yet ever changing. It's a concept across the globe, but whose freedoms impact approximately only 1/3 who can enjoy those freedoms. Martin Luther King said, "One's dignity may be assaulted, it may be vandalized, it may be cruelly taken back, but it can never actually be taken away unless it is surrendered." And I say that because when I think of human rights, what comes to mind is the inherent dignity of personhood. And what's interesting for me is that I was born in a country, on a continent, that hasn't always had the greatest track record on human rights. I was born in Nigeria. I was born in a city called Lagos. And yet, even they understood something. In 1961, a group of 194 judges, practicing lawyers, law professors, participated in a conference held by the International Commission of Jurists in Lagos. And the main conclusion that emerged from that was that the dignity of the human person is a universal concept, regardless of the different forms that it may assume. So, if I can get a little personal, is that okay if I can maybe? Okay. You know, when you get involved in politics, you've got two choices. You can speak nicely and try and be polite and say all the right things, or you can learn to actually speak truth and deal with the consequences. It's something that I want you all to remember about those choices. What I experience in this country, in this great country, where my mother is from, is a whole lot different than what I experience when I'm in Nigeria, where my father was from. In that country, my dignity as a black man is assured. I never once have to think about it. I'm never conscious of my presence around other people. I just am. It's not quite the same when I arrive back in our country here. And if I may say, within 10 minutes of getting off of a plane,
get involved politically for those who can vote and for those who can't vote yet?
All right. The very first thing is, it's important to remember that in the history of civil rights, that it was students who led much of the focus and the energy. If you think back on SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, their work in DC, their work founded in 1969. I wanted to make sure that I didn't get my date wrong. Youth-led, nonviolent, direct action campaigns against segregation and other forms of racism. And the members played an incredible role in the sit-ins and with the Freedom Riders, the 1963 March on Washington, and voter education projects such as the Mississippi Freedom Summer. Those were students who organized. Those are students who had a presence of mind that not everybody lives the so-called American dream. And we're committed to ensure that more and more, if not all, Americans have that opportunity to live out their potential, regardless of their race or their gender or anything else. That simply being an American mattered. And that came from students. And I'll tell you, even these last 2 years, we just created last year a youth council that, it had eight students this last fall. We want to have it so that there are 25 of them, which reflect the council districts, there are 25 council districts, because we realize that they have a different perspective than we do. And their experience is far different than ours, as we're growing older. We're looking for students. We're looking for the, for the young minds, because we know that they've got answers that we'll never be able to understand or never be able to contemplate. The role of the student is essential in progress, not just today, not just 58 years ago. It's always been important. And just know that you have a role, and we want to honor that role. You just need to have the will and the want to step into that role.
Thank you so much. So the part you were saying about that student council that you all just put together of, I believe, 25?
It was 8 this first cohort, but we'll be going to 25.
Okay. So my next question, just coming off of that, after seeing the recent protests and even January 6th, like the anniversary of January 6th and what happened last year, did any discussions in the city council change because of those events?
Without question. One of the largest changes that we made was based on an incident. I believe it was maybe May 30th. It was a Sunday. And 2 young protesters at the corner of Pennsylvania and Washington were batoned. And although we didn't see all the video, what we did see was non-resistance. So the question came up, why are we batoning young ladies, 2 young ladies, whose arms are by their sides? Why is that okay? And so we were told that it's policy. And I was told by one individual that because the lady's hands, although they were vertical, were in fists, were in balled fists. And if you've ever gotten beaten by a parent or a teacher, and by the way, I'll just say, when I went to school in Nigeria, I did get beat, so I know what the response is. I just want to put it out there. You are rigid, and everything goes rigid, and you do ball your fists. Well, the balled fists were supposedly a concern, and it seemed that it was okay to baton them. What we did, because of what we heard from demonstrators and protesters, was we created something that brought us a lot of headwind. But it was called the General Orders Board, which is where policy is formed. And up until that time, and it's still a controversial discussion, up until that time, policy, police policy, was done and created by law enforcement without any civilian input. And that, we realized, is a concern, because until you can hear from the people that these laws are going to impact, we're not actually working in the spirit, I think, upon which this country was founded. And so we created something called the General Orders Board, which is majority civilian, who can then work through what policies will remain, what new policies come forward, just what are those policies. That was a result, an example of a result, that we heard, and we decided we will do something about this because we've heard and because we know that our community members have spoken and found it disturbing. And that's our role as representatives.
Thank you. My next question is, as president of the city council, what does your job entail? What is your vision for the city council or in Indiana or Indianapolis in general?
That is a loaded question. It is loaded. It entails having a vision and making sure that the vision reflects the will of our constituents. And more, our job has been greater outreach, greater participation of our community members. Here's an example. Every 10 years, there's a census, the decennial census. And every 10 years, the Congress and state representatives and state senators, members of councils, have to redraw their district boundaries based on census, census feedback, census data. Population shift, communities of interest, may shift. It is now on us and the council this season to redraw the district boundaries for the council districts in Marion County. And what we've done is, we believe it is the most transparent and the most engaged process. It's been designed to be this way. We want to have open forums on our district boundaries. Typically, you might see across the country that those individuals who are in leadership draw their own boundaries. And oftentimes they draw them to preserve their own power. Does this sound familiar? I didn't hear you. Does this sound familiar?
Yes.
So what we want to do is change that so that we get more citizen participation in the outcomes of those boundaries. What are the common, what are those communities of interest? What are the things that are important to our citizens? And we're going to do this in open forums, one in every single township, over the next 2 months. This is the kind of thing that is a vision for our council. How can we be more deliberate in getting community feedback so that we know how to do our job better? And in fact, one other thing, sorry, this may sound boring, but I'll just tell you. Because of their American Rescue Plan dollars that the city of Indianapolis received last year, it was $419 million. A lot of that goes into community safety. What are we doing to know better where to apply those dollars than to go to community members who know their own particular communities better than anyone else, better than any one of the 25 of the counselors? We want to get that input and then make decisions from what we've been told versus imposing from the top down, we're going to fund this particular program or this particular initiative. That's where I think this is what we have learned and what we are continuing to learn, that we've got to get our citizenry engaged, one, and involved so that we can hear what's best and what they believe is best. Because our constituents know their districts, their areas far better than we ever will. Just like every one of you knows his or her family member better than I ever will. Yes? So in the same manner, if we scale that up, a neighborhood knows its own challenges far better than we will. And part of this has come from 2 years ago. And the third element, if you don't mind, even before COVID hit, or before George Floyd was murdered, we started 2 years ago this month a declaration that the work that we were going to do was going to have as a foundation a response and a sensitivity to race and to equity. And our role in government, as you ask, is to set a vision for our city. And part of that vision is we've done things a certain way for decades and for generations. And yet we still have these great, wide chasms of inequity. Our role is to address those head on, like that buffalo, I believe, that you just talked about. And make us all accountable. And so now every year, that every agency which gets funding comes before the council, and they have a series of questions that they must answer related to their staff, related to the products they buy, related to the salaries of their staff, the positions of their staff? Do we have an equitable distribution? Are we looking at our spending in an equitable manner? So why we've used a particular firm now to supply us, I don't know, printing paper. Okay, have we ever looked at anyone else? Have we actually been intentional about looking for other opportunities for other entities, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, folks who have disabilities who own businesses? Are we being conscious of that? And are we providing the opportunity for as many people to be successful in this city as possible? Or do we do what we've always done, which will end up being the same results that we've always had? And so when you ask what do we do, or what in our local government, is to ask ourselves those questions. Are we going to make a difference? And is it going to impact through our communities so that everyone wakes up with a sense of dignity and hope for that day, not just for themselves, but for their families?
Thank you. I really love that answer. It's a great answer. My final question is, how can non-Black people live out the dream MLK had? How can they be better allies?
So not being non-Black, I had to ask someone who was non-Black. Because I don't want to assume nothing. I'm telling you all, don't assume anything. Don't think you know everything. So I had to go do my own research. And I got back some interesting answers, actually. One was, don't ever assume that you're woke. Because as soon as you assume that you're woke, it is proof positive that you're not. And the other is, listen first before speaking. Hear the other perspectives so that you want to give respect and honor to those others, but so that you can actually hear someone else's perspective, not just your own. If you don't mind, I had to write these down because, I'll just tell you now, I want to listen, I want to hear, I don't want to assume nothing. Another was make a conscious choice to walk in another person's shoes. It is a choice. Just like a moment ago when I was talking about living in Nigeria or being in Nigeria, that I don't ever think about myself as a Black man. I just am. Does that make sense? It's like when you're at home, you don't think about, I'm the son of this man and that woman. You just are, right? Those are your parents. That's a fact of life. Well, it is a conscious choice when you're not in your own environment to be looking. It's a conscious choice to be looking out for someone else. That when they're in your environment, how are they adapting to it? How are they responding to it? When your friends come over to your house, I don't think they call your mom and dad, do they? Do they? Because if so, y'all need to be asking some questions. I just want to keep that part real. Just keep that in the back pocket. They're not at home. They're at your home. And your job as a host, as a friend, is to make sure they feel comfortable, right? So they come back. In the same way, even here in school, on your sports teams or in your debate clubs or whatever else, if you know that someone who is with you, part of your team, is not part of the majority in a sense, have the consciousness to put yourself in their shoes to make sure that they are okay. And then to be willing to listen to make sure that everyone else thinks or is sensitive, to make sure that, are we part of a team or are we a team and then we got this other person up in here? Does that make sense? Because from that other person's perspective, they're not at home. Just like when your friends come by to visit, they're not in their own home. It's a form of grace and respect for the human dignity and the human experience of someone else. So it's a conscious choice, and one that I would ask all of us to try, even if you got to put it on your screensaver, about remembering someone else's experience. I think it will help.
Thank you so much. That concludes all my questions. Let's give President Osili a round of applause.
Thank you guys for that discussion. That was an amazing discussion. Now introducing Layla for our speaker.
Hi, I'm Layla Kiwanuka, and I'm a junior here currently at Brebeuf. This past summer, I was fortunate enough to have the chance to learn more of Black history other than surface level things like slavery, the transatlantic trade, Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and Ruby Bridges. Have you ever thought about that? There are so many topics that can be learned, but schools ask to cut it short in order to give students the full American history. I just think that while all of these things I mentioned are nice to know and acknowledge, I just want to say that there is so much more that can be learned and gained. So over the summer, I signed up to, sorry, over the summer, I signed up for a trip that is offered by that was offered by the University of Evansville in Evansville, Indiana. It was called Journey to Justice. It helped me and all of the others on my trip to truly understand the past of African Americans in this country. We learned about the multitude of businesses and churches that aided during the Montgomery boycott, so it wasn't just Rosa Parks in this movement as it is often portrayed. We also learned about the different white people at the time that used their positions for good, some with power and some with no. Um, And we went to various as well as influential parks and museums. For example, the Kelly Ingram Park, the Equal Justice Initiative, or EJI, the 16th Baptist Church, the Legacy Museum, and the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, or BCRI, to name a few. Now, some of these places may sound familiar and some may not, but the question is, are you willing to take the initiative to further educate yourself in this history? After returning home from the trip, I felt as though that I had a better understanding of the life and past here of Americans or here of African Americans in America. Although I had a better understanding, I knew that this wasn't the end all be all, and there was still so much more for me to learn. Now, I want to make clear that despite my outer appearance, I am African American and not necessarily Black. Both of my parents were born to people that came directly from Uganda, an eastern country in Africa on the equator, and my mom was born in Uganda before emigrating to the United States as a kid. So the generational stories and knowledge passed down to Black Americans here in the US aren't necessarily passed down in my family. As I continued to grow older, I became more and more aware of how oblivious I was to the history of Black Americans here in America. There are so many things I could talk about, but I think the things that resonated with me the most from this trip was learning about the mass incarceration rate, the mass lynchings, and just the prejudice that began since African Americans were brought here. The one that hit me the most was the mass incarceration rate. When we went to the Equal Justice Initiative Museum, or the EJI, I learned that one in every three Black men will have been in prison at least once in their lifetime. Now that data is a little outdated by a few years, but it isn't off by much. After learning that African Americans are roughly 4 times as likely to be arrested for marijuana than their white counterparts, it enforced my belief that we need to work harder to improve the systemic racism in this country. By saying work harder, I mean I feel as though that there's more that can be done to bring awareness to the fact that systemic racism is a thing. A few acts of performative activism aren't good enough. The We Stand With You movement, and most specifically the Black Square post, can be helpful, but it can also be harmful. Advocating for Black lives became more popular during the pandemic, specifically quarantine, as well as after the death of George Floyd. My only concern is, are people still advocating today, or was it really just a phase? I want to know that my Blackness will always be protected and valued. I don't want it to just be a fleeting moment because it's trendy to post a square, giving the sense that you care about the movement. To me, I feel as though that if you are just posting to be cool or considered trendy, then you shouldn't be posting at all. I understand that posting a Black square was something that everyone could participate in, but if there was no meaning behind it and you just posted because everyone else did, then you aren't helping the cause as much as you believe you are. The meaning behind it becomes empty if you are posting it just because everyone else did. When you posted the Black square, did you believe that you felt that you did all that you could? Before you posted the Black square, did you also take the consideration to actually look into why it became a thing or it became a trend? Now, your answers may vary, and I'm certainly not saying that there is one right and there is one wrong. In my opinion, I feel as though that there is always more that can be done. Posting a square is not the end all be all. There are so many businesses that you can support, marches that you can participate in, or books that can be read to help educate yourself and others. It is all a matter of finding out where and how to begin these acts. Doing research is key, and as Martin Luther King states, human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Every step toward the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle. Now, the suffering and struggle are a little different and not as applicable to today, but it is up to us to take the initiative to aim at improving the injustice and making this country a better place to live, not just for a specific group of people, but for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Layla, for that. That was amazing. I want to give one final thanks to everyone who helped make this convocation possible. My amazing co-chair, Kennedy Hogue, Ms. Storrs, Mr. Pettigrew, Mr. Van Slambrook, and the crew who made this run as smoothly as it could while streaming. And now we welcome back Mr. Van Slambrook.
Good morning, everyone. Just want to wrap before the discussion in the classes, the program here with a huge thanks on behalf of the whole school. I'm grateful. I'm very grateful as principal for the opportunity for our students to learn from these messages today from each of you. I'm grateful for Jaden and Layla for putting yourselves out there and being vulnerable and open and sharing about yourselves with us. You did a great job. Thank you both. Grateful for Mr. Osili in our community and for your messages to us today. I think we can learn a lot, and just grateful for you. Thank you so much.